May 1945. A British major stands before a Wehrmacht general in a bombed Berlin basement. Protocol demands execution. Intelligence files confirm war crimes. The prisoner expects death. Instead, the major asks one question that will reshape Europe. Can you rebuild what you destroyed? 4 years later, Germany rises from ashes faster than anyone predicted. The general never faces trial. The major never seeks recognition. What happened in that basement remained classified for 50 years. Berlin, 8th of May 1945, 1437. Major Edmund Graves walked through rubble that once formed Wilhelmstrasse, boots crunching over shattered glass and brick dust. The air reeked of cordite, burnt wood, and death. Temperature hovered at 11 degrees, unseasonably cold. Rain had fallen that morning, turning ash into grey paste that clung to everything. Around him, the Reich's capital lay utterly destroyed. 70% of buildings reduced to skeletal frameworks. Water mains burst. Electricity non-existent. 2 million civilians sheltering in basements, surviving on rats and hope. Graves commanded the 47th Intelligence Section, tasked with locating high-value Wehrmacht personnel. His orders were explicit: identify, interrogate, prepare for Nuremberg trials. Execution was presumed for anyone with blood on their hands. The British military justice system operated with methodical precision. Evidence was gathered, testimonies recorded, justice would be served. In his leather satchel, Graves carried a file marked General Major Werner Hauser, priority arrest. Hauser had commanded logistics operations across the Eastern Front. His efficiency was legendary. Soviet convoys destroyed with mathematical precision. Partisan supply lines severed systematically. His units had facilitated the Wehrmacht's advance deep into Soviet territory, prolonging the war by months, perhaps years. The Red Army wanted him hanged. The Americans wanted him interrogated first, then hanged. The British agreed with both assessments. Graves descended into a basement beneath what remained of the Ministry of Transport. Electric torches illuminated corridors lined with filing cabinets, most empty, documents burned. At the corridor's end, 2 privates stood guard outside a reinforced door. They saluted. Inside, General Major Werner Hauser sat on a wooden chair, hands bound, uniform stripped of insignia. He was 52, graying at the temples, face weathered by 4 years of Russian winters. His eyes held no fear, only resignation. Graves dismissed the guards. The door closed. Silence, except for water dripping somewhere. Hauser spoke first, German accent thick but English fluent. "I assume you are here to formalize charges before execution. I am prepared." His voice was steady. No pleading, no excuses. The tone of a man who had accepted his fate. Graves opened the file. "Your logistics operations facilitated German advances, resulting in an estimated 400,000 Soviet military casualties. Civilian deaths in territories you supplied are incalculable. Partisans your units hunted numbered in the tens of thousands. You coordinated supply chains that kept the Wehrmacht functioning when collapse seemed inevitable. You extended the war. You are responsible for deaths that might have been avoided had German logistics failed sooner." Hauser nodded slowly. "That is accurate. I performed my duty with competence. I will not apologize for competence. I will answer for consequences." There was no defiance, just statement of fact. This was a man who understood accountability. Graves studied him. The file contained more. Hauser held a doctorate in civil engineering from the Technical University of Berlin. Before the war, he had designed railway systems across Central Europe. His expertise in logistics was not merely military. He understood infrastructure at a level few officers possessed. He had built systems that moved millions of tons of materials across thousands of miles. He had solved problems that seemed unsolvable. Outside this basement, Germany was dying. The Morgenthau Plan proposed reducing Germany to pre-industrial status: fields, agriculture, no heavy industry, no reconstruction beyond basic subsistence. The argument was persuasive. A destroyed Germany could never wage war again. Let them starve. Let them suffer. Justice for millions. But Graves had walked through Berlin. He had seen the children, skeletal, eating grass, drinking contaminated water. Disease was spreading. Typhoid, dysentery, tuberculosis. Winter would come again. Without shelter, without heat, hundreds of thousands more would die, and if Germany collapsed entirely, chaos would spread. Refugees flooding west, Soviet influence expanding unchecked. A power vacuum across Central Europe. Churchill had spoken privately to intelligence officers before Graves deployed. The Prime Minister's words echoed, "We fought for civilization. If we permit barbarism to follow victory, we betray everything we fought for. We must be better than our enemies." Graves closed the file. He asked the question that would change everything. "Can you rebuild what you destroyed?" Hauser's eyes widened. Confusion, suspicion. "I do not understand." Germany is destroyed. Infrastructure is non-existent. Railways are twisted metal. Bridges are rubble. Factories are burnt shells. 2 million people in this city alone are starving. Winter will kill hundreds of thousands. The question is simple. Can you rebuild it? Hauser leaned forward, chains rattling. Rebuilding Germany would require materials, labor, coordination across sectors, integration of civilian and military engineering expertise, centralized planning with decentralized execution, and approximately 4 years of sustained effort. It would require someone who understands German industrial capacity, railway logistics, manufacturing processes, and supply chain management at national scale. It would require someone willing to work under Allied supervision, accepting that Germany will never again possess military capability, focusing entirely on civilian reconstruction. He paused. "Yes, I could rebuild it, but why would you permit this?" Graves stood, pacing the small room. "Because Britain cannot afford another war. We cannot afford chaos on the continent. We cannot afford Soviet expansion into a vacuum. We cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of Versailles, where humiliation bred resentment that bred Hitler. We need Germany stable, prosperous enough to resist extremism, integrated into Europe economically. We need it rebuilt, and we need it done before the Soviets decide to fill the void themselves." Hauser watched him carefully. "You are offering me life in exchange for labor. I am offering you purpose. Your expertise will save lives, German lives, British lives, European lives. You will work under British supervision, every decision reviewed, every action monitored. You will never command troops. You will never hold political office. You will be a technician, an engineer, nothing more. But you will rebuild your nation. When you die, it will be as a man who created rather than destroyed." The room was silent. Hauser's hands trembled slightly. "And if I refuse? You hang within a fortnight. Your expertise dies with you. Germany rebuilds slowly, chaotically, or not at all. Choose." Hauser closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears traced lines down his weathered face. "I accept." June 1945, the newly formed German Reconstruction Authority operated from requisitioned offices in Frankfurt, chosen because the city suffered less damage than Berlin. Hauser worked 18-hour days under constant guard. British engineers monitored every calculation. American observers reviewed every plan. Soviet representatives demanded explanations for every decision, suspecting plots within plots. The conditions were medieval. Office had electricity 3 hours daily, powered by a generator running on fuel rationed from military supplies. No heating. Summer heat made the rooms stifling. Hundreds of documents covered every surface. Railway schematics, factory capacity reports, population surveys, damage assessments. Hauser worked by candlelight when electricity failed, which was often. The challenges were staggering. Germany's railway network, once Europe's finest, was 90% destroyed. Bridges blown during retreats, tracks torn up, locomotives sabotaged, rolling stock burned. The Reichsbahn had operated 30,000 locomotives in 1939. By May 1945, fewer than 3,000 remained functional. Moving food from countryside to cities was impossible. Moving coal from Ruhr to factories was impossible. Moving anything anywhere was impossible. Materials were non-existent. Steel production had collapsed. Concrete manufacturing ceased. Timber was being scavenged for firewood. Every resource was scarce. Every component precious. Hauser needed to rebuild infrastructure with almost nothing. Labor was abundant, but broken. Millions of German men were dead, captured or crippled. Women formed construction brigades, clearing rubble with bare hands. Trümmerfrauen, rubble women, became the backbone of reconstruction. They worked without machinery, without tools beyond shovels and buckets. They sorted bricks, they cleared streets, they rebuilt foundations. Their hands bled, their backs broke. They continued. Hauser's first decision was controversial. He proposed cannibalizing military infrastructure to rebuild civilian systems. Unused Wehrmacht supply depots contained materials, steel beams, concrete, cables. Military railways could be dismantled, components repurposed for civilian routes. The British approved. The Soviets objected, demanding materials be seized as reparations. Negotiations lasted weeks. Finally, compromise. 50% for reconstruction, 50% for reparations. Hauser designed reconstruction in phases. Phase 1. Restore critical railways connecting food-producing regions to cities. Priority routes identified through statistical analysis of starvation rates. Cities with highest mortality received connections first. Brutal calculus. Save the most lives possible with limited resources. Teams worked through summer heat and autumn rain. British engineers supervised German crews. They worked in 12-hour shifts, no weekends, no holidays. The railway between Hamburg and the Ruhr was priority alpha. Hamburg's port could receive food shipments from Britain and America. The Ruhr contained factories that could produce materials for further reconstruction. Connecting them would create a self-sustaining loop. Progress was agonizingly slow. Bridges required engineering solutions impossible with available materials. Hauser improvised. Temporary wooden trestles replaced destroyed stone arches. Not permanent, not beautiful, but functional. The British engineering officer overseeing the work, Captain Morris, watched skeptically as German crews erected structures that seemed impossibly fragile. "Those trestles won't hold a locomotive," Morris said flatly. Hauser pointed to calculations. "They will hold a locomotive moving at 15 miles per hour, carrying half normal load. We reduce speed. We reduce cargo weight. We make 10 trips instead of 5. It takes longer, but it works." Morris reviewed the mathematics. The numbers held. Bloody hell, it's mad, but it's brilliant. The first locomotive crossed the Hamburg-Ruhr route on 3rd September 1945. It carried grain, 20 tons. The journey took 9 hours instead of the pre-war 2 hours. But it arrived. In Hamburg, children received their first proper meal in 4 months. Mortality rates dropped 12% within 3 weeks. Hauser showed no emotion when informed. He simply marked the route operational on his map and moved to the next problem. Berlin to Dresden, Munich to Stuttgart, Cologne to Frankfurt, each route a lifeline, each route saving thousands. But the human cost was visible everywhere. Hauser witnessed it daily during site inspections. Workers collapsed from exhaustion. Accidents killed dozens weekly. A crane failure in Essen crushed 4 women beneath steel beams. An unstable wall collapsed in Cologne, burying 6 men. Hauser attended every funeral. He never spoke. He just stood, watching coffins lowered into ground, knowing his decisions had led these people to those sites. Captain Morris found him one evening staring at casualty reports. "You can't save everyone," Morris said quietly. "I killed hundreds of thousands during the war," Hauser replied, voice hollow. "Now I am killing dozens, trying to save millions. The mathematics are better. The guilt is the same. Guilt means you're human. Use it. Don't let it stop you. By December 1945, 15 major railway routes were operational. Coal moved from mines to factories. Factories began producing materials for further reconstruction. Steel production increased 40%. Concrete manufacturing resumed. The reconstruction was feeding itself, but winter came brutally. Temperatures plunged to -15. Fuel shortages meant limited heating. Reconstruction slowed. Workers couldn't function in extreme cold. Also requisitioned military tents, had them erected around work sites, used portable heaters powered by rationed fuel. The British approved emergency allocations. Work continued. Hauser developed typhoid in January, fever, delirium. British medical staff treated him in a military hospital. He was unconscious for 4 days. When he woke, Captain Morris sat beside the bed, paperwork stacked on a chair. "You've been unconscious." Work continued. Routes 17 and 18 are operational. Route 19 encountered difficulties. Flooding. "We need your assessment." Hauser tried to sit. Pain lanced through his chest. "How many died while I was ill?" "Reconstruction deaths?" 11. "Disease mostly." "Accidents 3. "Then I must return to work." "Doctor says you need 2 weeks." "Doctor can prescribe what I do while working." Morris smiled grimly. "Stubborn bastard." "Very well, but you work from bed until fever breaks." Hauser worked from the hospital bed, reviewing plans, making calculations, dictating instructions. By March 1946, he was back in Frankfurt, thinner, weaker, unrelenting. The reconstruction was working. Germany was beginning to breathe again, but the hardest challenges remained ahead. Autumn 1947. Soviet intelligence had been monitoring the reconstruction with growing alarm. Reports crossed Stalin's desk with increasing frequency. German industrial output was recovering faster than projections suggested possible. Railways operated with efficiency that seemed impossible given the devastation. Factories produced materials at rates that defied logic. Soviet analysts pored over data, searching for explanations. The reports were contradictory. British occupation forces were not investing significant resources. American Marshall Plan aid was substantial, but not extraordinary compared to other European nations. Yet Germany was recovering faster than France, faster than Belgium, faster than anyone except perhaps Britain itself. The explanation emerged slowly. Centralized planning with decentralized execution. Someone was coordinating reconstruction with military precision. Someone understood German infrastructure intimately. Someone was making decisions that seemed impossibly efficient. Soviet intelligence identified Werner Hauser within weeks. The implications were staggering. A Wehrmacht general, responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, was now rebuilding Germany under British supervision. Stalin was furious. This was collaboration with war criminals. This was permitting the enemy to rebuild. This was laying groundwork for future conflict. Soviet representatives at Allied Control Council meetings demanded Hauser's immediate arrest and trial. The British refused. American representatives, seeing Reconstruction success, supported Britain. The French, initially skeptical, acknowledged that German recovery meant European recovery. Without German industry, France couldn't rebuild. Without German railways, continental trade was impossible. The Soviets escalated. Pravda published articles denouncing British perfidy in protecting Nazi war criminals. Soviet representatives threatened to withdraw from joint reconstruction efforts. The emerging Cold War turned Hauser into a symbol of East-West division. Meanwhile, German civilians knew nothing of the controversy. They saw only results. Trains ran, factories operated, food arrived, housing was rebuilt. In Munich, entire neighborhoods rose from ruins. In Hamburg, the port functioned. In the Ruhr, blast furnaces roared back to life. Hauser remained invisible. British policy forbade publicizing his role. He worked anonymously, a technical advisor whose name appeared on no documents accessible to Germans. Only Allied personnel knew. And among them, opinions varied wildly. British officers who worked with him daily developed grudging respect. Captain Morris, now Major Morris, told fellow officers, "The man's a bloody machine, never stops, never complains. He's saving thousands of lives and killing himself doing it." American observers were more skeptical. Colonel Patterson, overseeing Marshall Plan distribution, confronted Graves directly. "You're using a war criminal to rebuild Germany. What happens when Germans discover their salvation came from a Wehrmacht general? He becomes a hero, a symbol. You're creating the seeds of German nationalism's resurgence." Graves, now Lieutenant Colonel Graves, responded quietly, "Germans won't know. Hauser works anonymously. When he dies, his role dies with him. What matters is that Germany rebuilds before chaos or communism fills the void. Pragmatism, Colonel. Unpleasant, but necessary. Pragmatism is what Britain said about appeasing Hitler. And rigid ideology is what Stalin says about starving his own people. We choose the option that saves lives. That's all." The debate raged within Allied command, but reconstruction continued. By 1948, Germany's railway network was 80% functional. Industrial production reached 50% of pre-war levels. Unemployment dropped below 15%. Housing construction exceeded projections. The German miracle became a common phrase, though no one understood how it happened so quickly. Hauser witnessed none of the praise. He worked in Frankfurt, rarely leaving his office except for site inspections. His health deteriorated. The typhoid had damaged his heart. British doctors warned him to reduce working hours. He refused. "I have 4 years to rebuild a nation. I cannot waste time sleeping 12 hours daily." The human impact of reconstruction was now visible everywhere. Children who had been skeletal in 1945 were healthy in 1948. Families had homes, workers had employment, schools reopened, hospitals functioned. Germany was alive again. But questions haunted those who knew the truth. Morris found Hauser alone one evening, reviewing population statistics. "You've saved hundreds of thousands of lives through this reconstruction. Does it balance the scales?" Hauser didn't look up. "No, nothing balances scales. I killed during war. I save during peace. Both are true. Neither cancels the other. I will die guilty, but I will die having done something useful with the years I did not deserve to have." "Do you regret accepting Graves's offer?" "Every day, and never." He finally looked up. "Regret is easy. Work is hard. I choose work." By spring 1949, the reconstruction entered final phase. Infrastructure was functional. Industry was recovering. The occupation was transitioning toward German self-governance. The Federal Republic of Germany would soon exist. Hauser's role was ending. Soviet intelligence made one final attempt. They leaked his identity to German communist newspapers. Headlines screamed, "British employ Nazi general for reconstruction." The story spread, but the response surprised everyone. German civilians, grateful for reconstruction, didn't care. They had food, they had homes, they had futures. Who coordinated it seemed irrelevant. The scandal died within weeks. Hauser remained anonymous to most Germans, a footnote in internal Allied documents, a ghost who rebuilt a nation from shadows. His work was complete. Germany stood again, not as military power, not as threat, but as functioning nation, integrated into Europe economically, no longer a void waiting to be filled by extremism or chaos. The Wehrmacht general had rebuilt what he helped destroy. History would forget him, but his work endured. May 1949. Werner Hauser stood in Frankfurt station, watching trains depart on schedule. 4 years earlier, this station had been rubble. Now it functioned with German efficiency restored. Trains to Hamburg, Munich, Berlin, Stuttgart. Passengers boarding, cargo loading, life moving forward. Hauser was 56 but looked 70. 4 years of 18-hour days had consumed him. His heart was failing. British doctors gave him months, perhaps a year. He accepted this with the same resignation he'd shown in that Berlin basement. He had been granted 4 years he didn't deserve. He had used them. That was enough. Lieutenant Colonel Graves found him there. They hadn't spoken in months. Graves had been promoted, transferred to occupation administration, but today he came personally. "It's finished," Graves said simply. "The occupation transitions to German administration next month. The Federal Republic begins. Your work is complete." Hauser nodded slowly. "Did we succeed? Germany is stable. Democracy is functional. Industry is recovering. Communist influence is contained. Soviet expansion stopped at the Iron Curtain. Yes, we succeeded. Then I can die satisfied." Graves was silent for a moment. "What you did saved hundreds of thousands of lives, perhaps millions. Without your expertise, reconstruction would have taken decades. Chaos would have spread. The Cold War might have gone hot. Europe owes you a debt that can never be acknowledged." "Europe owes me nothing. I created the destruction I later repaired. There is no moral credit for cleaning up one's own mess. The men who destroyed Germany are mostly dead or imprisoned. You were the exception. You chose redemption over pride. That matters." Hauser turned to face him. "Does it? I killed during war with efficiency. I rebuilt during peace with efficiency. I was a tool in both cases. Tools have no morality, only function." Graves shook his head. "You're wrong. Tools don't weep at funerals. Tools don't work themselves to death from guilt. Tools don't sacrifice years they could have spent in comfort to save people who once were enemies. You chose to be human. That's redemption. I chose to be useful. That's survival." They stood in silence, watching trains. Finally, Graves spoke again. "Your role will remain classified for 50 years. No recognition, no acknowledgement, no place in history books. When Germans tell the story of reconstruction, your name won't appear. Is that acceptable?" "It is preferable. I do not want gratitude for competence. I want to be forgotten." "You will be. But those who know will remember." Werner Hauser died in November 1949. Heart failure, quiet and quick. He was buried without ceremony in Frankfurt. A headstone reading simply, "Werner Hauser, 1893–1949, engineer." No military rank, no mention of war service, no indication he had rebuilt a nation. The impact of his work echoed through decades. Germany's rapid recovery created economic stability that anchored Western Europe. The German economic miracle became textbook material for economists. Theories multiplied. Marshall Plan aid, ordo-liberal policy, German work ethic, all true, all incomplete. The real foundation was infrastructure rebuilt with ruthless efficiency by a man who understood logistics at a level few possessed. Railways that moved goods swiftly, factories that produced materials reliably, systems that worked because someone had designed them to work, then supervised execution with military precision. In 1999, 50 years after Hauser's death, British military archives declassified documents related to German reconstruction. Historians discovered references to Technical Advisor H. Deep research identified Werner Hauser. Academic papers followed. The Wehrmacht general who rebuilt Germany. Engineering redemption, Hauser and post-war reconstruction. Pragmatism and justice, Allied use of German military expertise. Public reaction was mixed. Some argued Hauser should have faced trial regardless of potential contributions. Justice demanded accountability. Using war criminals for practical purposes set dangerous precedent. Others argued pragmatism saved lives. Letting Hauser hang would have been morally satisfying but practically disastrous. The reconstruction might have taken decades longer. Thousands more would have died. The debate continues in academic circles, but the facts are undeniable. Germany rebuilt in 4 years, infrastructure functioned, stability emerged, democracy took root, economic recovery provided foundation for European integration. The European Union's origins trace partially to German industrial recovery that made continental cooperation economically viable. Major Edmund Graves, who made the initial decision to spare Hausa, never spoke publicly about it. He retired from military service in 1952, returned to civilian life in Dorset, worked as a teacher. When historians contacted him in the 1990s, he declined interviews. He died in 2003, aged 91, having never publicly confirmed or denied the Hausa story. Captain Morris, who supervised Hausa's work directly, was more forthcoming in his later years. In a 2001 interview, aged 83, he reflected, "Hausa was a war criminal by any legal definition. He facilitated deaths. That's undeniable. But he also saved lives, perhaps more than he killed. Does that balance? I don't know. I'm not God. I just know that without him, Germany would have collapsed into chaos. The Cold War might have gone hot, Europe might have fractured. So I choose to believe Graves made the right call, not because it was just, but because it was necessary. The legacy is complicated. Justice wasn't served. War crimes went unpunished. But pragmatism saved countless lives and stabilized a continent. The moral calculus remains unsettling. Should efficiency outweigh accountability? Should practical benefit override legal justice? History doesn't provide clear answers. It provides only facts. A Wehrmacht general escaped execution. He rebuilt a nation. He died anonymously. His work endured. Europe prospered. Perhaps that's all that can be said with certainty. Werner Hauser's story illustrates something fundamental about human capacity for both destruction and creation. Individuals possess agency. Choices matter. A man who facilitated death chose to facilitate life. It didn't erase his crimes, it didn't redeem his soul, but it saved thousands of people who otherwise would have died. In the calculus of lives saved versus justice denied, history made its choice. The trains still run on routes Hauser designed. The factories still operate on foundations he planned. The nation he rebuilt became Europe's economic engine, driving prosperity for generations. His name is forgotten by most. His work endures. Perhaps that's the most honest epitaph. He was guilty. He was useful. Both are true. Neither cancels the other. History remembers results. Morality questions methods. Both are necessary. Neither is sufficient. The Wehrmacht general rebuilt Germany in 4 years because a British major chose pragmatism over protocol, redemption over revenge, and lives over justice. Whether that was wisdom or weakness remains debated, but the outcome is undeniable. Germany rose from ashes. Europe found stability. The Cold War remained cold, and a war criminal died having saved more lives than he destroyed, though he never believed it balanced the scales. That's the untold story of how one controversial decision changed the course of European history. If you found this fascinating, subscribe to our channel for more hidden stories from World War II that shaped the world we live in today. What do you think? Was sparing Hauser the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. History is never simple, but it's always worth exploring.